about multisensory interfaces. And I was trying to really prepare slides that kind of reflect this human AI interaction, or I should have called it co-creation, because it isn't particularly the main focus of my research, or wasn't, but obviously it has become now in many, many ways. It also touches the different multisensory experiences. As I already said, I'm based in London at the computer science department at UCL. But I also wear a second hat where I'm co-founder and chief scientific officer for a startup. My former postdoc, Emanuela Maggioni, and I co-founded Hint Labs, which is particularly focusing on transitioning the work we've done around scent to digital scent technology. So just to kind of like give you an overview, although obviously sight and hearing is our senses, which I'm including, it's not the main focus of the research I'm doing. It's really looking beyond the audiovisual ecosystem and looking at touch, taste, and smell. And I must say, in the last few years, it really has become a particular focus on the chemosensory interfaces that we can create. And I think it's always important to acknowledge some of the early supporters of this. I always call it alien research because I always feel like an alien in my engineering computer science departments, especially when I'm asking to have a kitchen, an experimental space with a fridge and stuff like that. It's like, who in computer science needs that? But the question that always drives the research I have done over more than a decade now is what touch, taste, and smell experiences can we design for and how? And this is really kind of like also then linked to why. Why would we want to also smell through technology or integrate smell and taste into technology-enabled interactions? And I will give you a few examples. And obviously with AI and LLMs, there's a lot of discussions now how we also can use those techniques and models to help create this ecosystem around touch, taste, and smell. But there are obviously some challenges still on how to do it, starting also from what displays to use, because while we have screens and headphones, we don't have the kind of off-the-shelf devices for smell and taste, for example. But before we dive into some of the examples, I want to also say, what are multisensory experiences? And Carlos Velasco and I, Carlos is at the business school in Norway, and I were working for over 15 years now together, and we wrote this book, Where the Senses Meet Technology, Multisensory Experiences. And one of the biggest tasks as part of this book, and don't worry, it's not a handbook, I'm not going to bother you with definitions, but this is quite important because we spent at least 6 months to trying to define what we mean by multisensory experiences, because it helps us as designers, developers, researchers to guide our research. So this is an important definition for me, which describes that multisensory experiences are impressions formed by specific events whose sensory elements have been carefully crafted by someone. So you can, these 4 highlighted areas, they will come back again. So that we kind of understand where the design can lead us and the development can focus. Also, when you think of it from a human AI co-creation. So for example, to create the impression of a sunflower, colors, shapes, textures, smells are considered. These senses are placed at the center of the formation of the impression of the sunflower, even in the absence of the flower. The even particularly refers to technology that enables this creation of the impression of a sunflower. It might sound very abstract, but let me just dive a little bit in. So if you want to particularly create this impression of a sunflower, what does the impression contain? The perception, the emotional, cognitive outcomes. So you can see the vibrant colors of a sunflower, you can smell them, you can touch the petals, you can maybe even taste the nuttiness of the seeds, but also hear the breezes around the sunflowers. And all those kind of different elements we as humans perceive. They cause an emotional reactions, and they also have higher level cognitive processes where we may associate them with certain memories and other kind of aspects, which are placed in a specific context, in a specific event. And that is very important. Second part, the event where the impression is created. So, or context. The event can be in different kind of encounters. Like again, for the sunflower, it could be you're just walking for a sunflower field. I don't know in Cagliari if there's some sunflowers out already. Mine are not out in my garden yet, but you could just walk through. Or you could take your mobile device and go through it and have some augmented reality app so you can actually learn about the different types of flowers you're seeing. Or you're placed in a virtual environment where you are not in a real field, but you still have the experience of a sunflower. So there are different events where an impression is placed. And in those kind of events, you combine different sensory elements to create this harmony of sensory stimuli. And that is really where technology and advances in different devices and interfaces have made a big change in the last 5 to 10 years, enabling the recreation of different scents, textures through digital touch, and obviously also audiovisual interfaces and devices. Just to give you an idea how we implemented that in one of the use cases. So this is an example of tree VR. It's a multisensory immersive experience where you embody a tree. So you, from a small seed, you're growing into a tall tree in the middle of the Peruvian tree in the middle of the Amazonas, and you kind of like your arms become branches, and then you feel also the wind and the temperature and so on. There is a whole kind of story behind, but I'm going to try to show you a short video that shows also the integration from the outside of these different sensory elements. So let's try that. Well, yeah, sorry, spoiler alert. And it's not the full experience. It's about an 8 to 10 minutes experience. And as you can imagine, you kind of become the tree, you grow tall, you have the birds on your branches, and then humankind comes and cuts the tree down, which gives the smoky smell, and you feel the vibrations on your back because there's vibrations, wind, the temperature. There are different elements integrated into this kind of virtual reality experience. And a lot of people have tried it out, and several of them also started crying in the end, especially when we tried it with people with visual impairment or blind individuals, because there you have the smell, you have the vibrations, you have the sound, which is extremely powerful to convey a specific message. But what I want to kind of really emphasize here is the impression we wanted to create. And this is a collaboration, or the main creators are New Reality in New York, is a creative studio, and they created the whole idea. What we then added is the digital technology to integrate really the synchronization with the sound and the scent and the temperature and the wind to create this life cycle of a tree in a first person perspective. It is an installation in various public events across the globe. So it moved from Dubai to Davos to China to New York, do G20 events. So it has been demonstrated and showcased and experienced by many, integrating, as I said, different sensory elements from wind, smell, vibrations, and so on. And it was supported by the Rainforest Alliance together with OW Now Hint, but also New Reality. And it was mainly to make people aware about deforestation. And there are many more of those kind of examples where multisensory immersive experiences can be quite powerful to convey a message if it's told over and over again, because suddenly it becomes embodied. But here we talk about real tree. But what if we want to kind of convey principles and concepts which are invisible, intangible, not perceivable, like dark matter? Here we worked with astrophysicists from Imperial College because we wanted, or they actually wanted, to communicate dark matter to the wider public. So this was part of a wider science communication initiative where we tried to integrate all the different sensory elements in order to create, well, a metaphorical representation of dark matter, because nobody knows if dark matter has a smell, how it feels. I mean, it's imperceivable. But again, it's this kind of representation of dark matter we wanted to create. And also it was demonstrated in Science Museum in the Imperial Outreach event over 2 days to the wider public. And it had all the different senses: vision, sound, touch, smell, and also taste. In this particular case, taste was very analog. It was a popping candy, which you put into your mouth. So there wasn't an easy interface we could integrate, but all other elements were digital elements. And so that was really, as I mentioned, the science communication initiatives. And so there are many more of those examples where especially artists, science communicators, creatives, they were very interested in exploring new sensory elements and integrating them in those kind of experiences, including art galleries to make art more accessible to people. But there are also others like automotive, in health and well-being applications for body image perception, integrating it into communication tools like Slack and others, which I will talk a little bit further later, which are now enabled through the integration of LLMs. And all that also required to build new sensory stimulation devices so that you can actually really stimulate all the different senses. And don't worry, the next slide is not for you to read all the details, but I just wanted to show you, and it was quite a nice exercise to put together some of the steps in our development of building both smell and taste interfaces and devices so that we are actually able to stimulate our nose and our tongue as part of creating this new human computer interactions and experiences. And it's really kind of nice also to see the evolution from in healthcare areas for smell testing, for training, but virtual reality, augmented reality, but also an installation. If you're in Singapore, there's a 5-year installation now where you can explore the ant kingdom through all your senses, especially smell. But also taste. Taste is one of those kind of final frontiers where you can stimulate all the other senses outside your body. Taste, you need to stimulate inside. So how do we stimulate your tongue? And maybe some of you have seen, you can put tubes in your mouth, you can tweeze your tongue with electrodes. Not quite the experience we're looking for. So that is one of the kind of array of research we've done using ultrasound, acoustic levitation. So basically you suspend a food particle with sound, and then the only thing you need is your tongue to take it out of midair. I'm not going to show you my tongue more, but if you're interested in that, maybe start with Tasty Floats. It's one of the first kind of prototypes we actually did, but there's some more to come. But all that to illustrate how we can create the sensory elements and integrate sensory elements in specific events to create a certain impression. And quite timely, last week, I think end of last week, the article Carlos and I were writing for communications, ACM Communications, was published. So if you don't want to read all the different papers, maybe you just want to read 4 pages. And these 4 pages describe quite concisely what multisensory experiences are, the formation, the realization, but we also take a strong perspective on the responsibilities that come with them, from sensory manipulation, from potential sensory overload, but also kind of like things we might not even consider yet, especially with AI becoming, well, let's say you're the expert here, but more emotionally intelligent, and how that might also affect the way we are creating multisensory experiences. So that might be quite a nice starting point. And if you don't like to read, they even made, ACM also made a short video with me. So I'm trying to explain it. So you have all the different options. You can't smell the paper yet, but maybe that's for the future. I wanted to give you one example in a bit more detail, which I worked over the last 3 years now, 4 years, which is part of a bigger consortium in the UK on circular textile experiences. So we most likely heard about circular economy, where we're trying to kind of reduce waste and net zero targets and so on. It's a global problem, the kind of waste we are producing. And the fashion industry is one of the biggest waster. And so my team was part of a big consortium that was led by the Royal College of Art in London, together with material scientists, supply chain experts, industries, and so on from the fashion industry, where we tried to look at creating new circular consumption experiences. And I don't know if you can see that, but there is this kind of circular kind of line here where it starts with the materials themselves, where the materials for garments come from, and how we can use food waste or other kind of wheat waste to then create new fibers, which can then be produced into new fabrics, and they can then produce new garments, which are more circular rather than you buy it, you wear it, you throw it away, and then it's in the landfill. And so where I was positioned with my team and a few other colleagues was not on the material science or supply chain, but in the consumer experience. So how can we create a stronger coupling between the material and the consumer? So you're more aware of what you're buying. Is it sustainable or not sustainable? And yes, there is no easy answer, because it depends where it's produced, where it comes from, how far it has been shipped to reach you, and so on, and also combinations of it. But one of the ways we did that is working, first of all, closely with the high street shops as well to reach the wider public. And what we do best is we create a multisensory experience around that topic. So what we created is farfalla, quite kind of fitting for Italy. Farfalla is the Italian word for butterfly, where we try to use this kind of little digital companion to guide you through a multisensory immersive experience of an alternative textile future. And so this is just a picture where Chris Doris, who was one of the main postdocs working with me, we exhibited in High Street in London last year, to enable others to kind of like engage in this alternative future, make them more aware. And yeah, as I already said, it's this coupling, so the keynotes between the consumer and the materials. But what I really want to emphasize here is that we started with the specific story we wanted to tell. And I mean, the consortium itself is over 20 people with very different opinions. But we try to come up with a narrative in order to tell the story about what is the experience we want to tell. So the first was to enter an alternative future, to then feel the soft touch on your skin through connecting. And I will explain that a bit more, but we integrate all the different sensory elements from touch, smell, sound, and vision, not taste. I think that was one of the things where we had quite a lot of ideas, but it's still not quite easy to do, especially when you then want to demo it in the wider public. So there's the whole kind of, you enter this alternative future, you're feeling the soft touches on your skin, and you end up in this future textile workshop where you can then engage with different materials, where you can experience also the the feel, the digital textiles, but also the scent of these textiles. And we worked very closely with the material scientists to identify what scent to add, especially when you have some cellulose fibers you're using, then there is this sweet smell in there. So we try to kind of really integrate some of that, but also make it abstract enough, because people's experiences are subjective. And so you can never have the full chemical representation here, but we want to make it as close representation as possible to the material scientists. And that's where you can also then become creative with the new materials, integrating some of the kind of fabrication techniques, and also become part of this new movement. So it's a whole story. It's a 10 minutes experience in XR. I know it's long, but it actually passes quite quickly. I think the biggest challenge still with virtual reality is to get everyone set up and ready. You cannot just walk up and go. We try that now as well. So we have an alternative developed. But I want to show you one part of it, which I think is quite nice, because it's the one where we integrate touch, and we're using mid-haptic stimulation. Again, it's using ultrasound, so you don't need to have gloves or any attachments. It's just a board which releases sound waves, and if you modulate it in the right way, it creates a feelable tactile sensation on your skin, in this case on your palm, and then also the scent which is released. I don't know if you saw it on the headset. We have made an attachment which is really connected to the device. So let me show you this short video.
Next, let's get creative by redesigning an old and rarely worn shirt. Grab the garment to your right. Move the garment to the mannequin. This t-shirt is perfectly fine. It's quite simple, but full of potential. Using regenerated materials, we can be playful with designs and colors to breathe new life into old clothing. Let's get creative. Put the garment under the 3D printer. Now, choose the new t-shirt design pattern. Next, choose where you would like it applied, as a full design or a logo. Finally, choose your color. With just a few choices, you've turned a simple garment into a piece of personal expression. Today you had a limited design selection, but you can print your own custom designs too. Great work! Now let's see how we can apply this to the real world.
So what unfortunately you couldn't get now is like when the 3D printer is doing is active, there is a scent released to the person, and also when you are touching the garment and putting it from the mannequin and back, you have a tactile sensation which we integrated as well. So if you're interested, we presented that at ICMI in Costa Rica last November, where we showed the integration between scent and touch, so augmenting haptic experiences of the digital mid-air textiles with scent, which is quite nice because we did lots of studies which then help us to create this overall integration of the different sensory element. But it's really only the beginning. And as I said, this is an appetizer, maybe not even an appetizer. This is even less than an appetizer, what you just saw, because there are so many more. But I hope you got a bit of an idea that there's only the beginning of multisensory experiences and interfaces. And it's really the question I would like to kind of pose to you: what impressions do you want to create? But I think what I tried now to do in the next few slides to finish it off is like also to think about, well, I guess you're there to talk not just about you, but you're talking about the human AI co-creation. So what if AI systems, not humans, were in charge for multisensory experiences? How would that look like? And if we take the specific examples of an alternative textile futures, what if AI could control what we experience we should have? For example, decide what we wear and how we dress, because there are lots of kind of like intricacy. Sometimes I ask always my husband, what should I wear? And it puts out stuff. I'm not very good in fashion, but so I would love AI to help me choose it. But are we becoming then too dependent, and how are they choosing based on what kind of features and parameters? And that's really where one of my PhD students, Xu Zhang, is doing her PhD. She's in her final year, and she worked with me over the last 3.5 years now on designing digital multisensory textile experiences. And she really applies and embodies a lot the advancements of AI and LLMs, which I just want to kind of give you a glimpse of how she started. Because if we want machines or AI systems to be able to help us create multisensory experiences, where do we start? Well, first of all, we need to give them, well, a language or a taxonomy. So she started building a material taxonomy based on the fibers and the fabrics for a fashion textile data set. Based on that, she used that taxonomy to then create a voice-based textile bot. So it's a voice bot, which then has a conversation with you around sustainable textiles. And that's something she just published as well, where she used different LLMs to create these voice agents, 3 different types of implementations, from an expert to an assistant. So you can imagine like going to the shop and you have 2 different people serving you and advising you. Some gives you very good advice, the other one might not be that good, and then you have your reference point. But I think what we now in the last 1.5 years turn to is like, well, when we talk about textile, it's not just about talking. It's not just about like seeing and distinguishing the colors, but it's also how does it feel? How can AI learn to touch? And that's when we started exploring human AI perceptual alignment in textile or touch experiences, using different kind of fabrics for the person to touch and then describe to the AI and to see if the AI is able to understand what we actually mean. This is still under review. Well, at ICMI, we published some part of it already, but others is still under review. And the latest was also still under review is where when you think about fabrics and textiles, they also have not just a textile feel, but often they have a smell. I don't know if you do that. When you go in a shop, you grasp something and you smell it maybe, you touch it definitely. And again, it's like, how do we teach AI what kind of scent experience I prefer or like? Obviously, there's a lot in perfume industry. There is algorithmic perfumery. There are kind of others who are trying to do the perfumes personalized for you. But again, here is all based on the conversation with the AI. How can they actually understand what it feels like and the distinctions of it and how it smells like? So if you're interested in it, I suggest, and I hope there are some of you in the audience who are interested. Xu is doing amazing work, so check out her profile. There, she has most of it online, and if not, then it's in a preprint, so you can dive into it in your own time. But just to leave you with some insights we have so far, some key takeaways we learned from how AI touches and smells or sniffs. There are lots of challenges still when it comes to perceptual alignment and multimodal perception, especially like translating this very subjective sensory experiences into data. It's quite a unique problem, not just because it's very subjective. It's also very idiosyncratic. Oh my God, this is a word I will never be able. We're all very different. We are all very unique. And so our sensory experiences are defined by our past experiences, by our cultural background. And all that kind of comes into this descriptions when we are having a language around the sensory experiences, and how to really make that link for the AI to understand us and help us in a seamless way is quite a unique challenge. Also, one of the things we notice in the experiments we've done over the last year is there is a bias in AI, especially current LLMs favor specific textiles like silk or scents, lemon, peppermint, but they ignore others. So there's clearly something in there where descriptors are often linked also to smooth and fresh. So there is much more we need to train models to help them, but also to really consider these individual differences and also cultural backgrounds. And the other thing we saw is an overviews of certain descriptors. Well, sure, we call it the fancy terms which AI is using. And they sometimes, if you use ChatGPT, I guess you also see, oh, we always harness and leverage certain things. So it kind of feels you can read a text and you know this is not written by a person, but it comes from AI. So it's like there are some certain fancy words, but then on the other hand, it could also be that because the data we have in this particular sector is very expert driven data. So we often have like sensory panels, especially when it comes to chemosensory interfaces. And maybe that's the problem, that we don't have the normal everyday use language, although obviously it's definitely getting better the more data we have. But that's bringing me to the final point of data limitation. So the real world perceptual alignment requires more diverse data sets to really include some of the everyday descriptions. And it's that kind of like unique problem with the first one, because one day we say we like something, the other day we don't. What happened in between? So it's not a simple problem, but I think it's a super interesting problem of triangulation one could consider. So yes, watch that space. I think there's something more to come. And she was sorry she couldn't make it to Cagliari, because I think this would have been a great opportunity. But hopefully some of you will be in Singapore, where she will present just before Kai to talk to her. So just to wrap it up, do you want to be the someone? Do you want to be the someone to create or form an impression and for certain events to create a multisensory experience? What are the sensory elements you would like to pick? I think the space is immense. There are so many opportunities. I think the limit, as Carlos and I write it in our book, is like your imagination, because the world is our canvas. But being the someone also means we have responsibilities. And I really want to emphasize that if the someone is the human or the I, we have to have this responsible perspective on designing multisensory experiences. When we wrote our book, Carlos and I finished with the 3 laws of multisensory experiences. We totally declare that this is inspired by Asimov, as many of you might notice. But it's that kind of like statement of the laws of multisensory experiences, to do good and not harm others, to consider the receiver of multisensory experiences, to treat them fairly. And also the someone and the sensory elements must be known. They seem very obvious, but if you go into the details, what is good and what is bad, it always depends on the context and the event. And sometimes it's not just black and white. So it's very this continuous engagement of responsible design and innovation is really important. And we also cannot just have like a one-off fits all design, because receivers are different. They can be clearly different from children to elderly or a certain cultural backgrounds, but they could also just be different based on their sensory profile. If I don't have a sense of smell, I'm already excluded from a certain experience, or a blind individual, or with hearing impairment. So we need to carefully consider that receiver and the someone. I mean, as I mentioned, you could be the someone. AI could be the someone. If it's AI, who is controlling the AI? Is it a big corporation? Is it a government? So there are different people who can make use of it. And I mean, we see a whole kind of discussion on that, but it's just like bringing it back in our awareness while we are doing it, because we often get carried away with the opportunities. And I picked one quote. Again, we just expecting our second edition of the book, which is coming out on the 15th of April. Oxford University Press was so kind to give us the opportunity, because we submitted our book in February 2020. Everyone knows what in March 2020 happened. And the whole digital transformation because of the pandemic also transformed some of the things we are describing in the book. So that's why there's already an earlier second version of the book with a much stronger a kind of ethical kind of discussion as well in our final chapter, but also we doubled the examples we found. So hopefully that's something to enjoy. And I want to leave you with one of the quotes which we added also, and it's from Niccolo Di Stefano, professor of philosophy from the National Research Council of Italy, who said, "The ethical implications of technology-enabled experiences are multifaceted and contingent upon the specific context in which they are deployed. For instance, providing primary school children with technology for multisensory learning can have profound social implications. On one hand, it may enhance learning trajectories, educational opportunities for those who have access to these technologies, but potentially exacerbating inequality for those who cannot afford them. So there is always different angles to consider. And it's that kind of continuous engagement, which I think is quite interesting because we can't stop technology. I think we all are here because we love technology, what it enables us to do. But we also need to consider what might be negative consequences and can we do something already now to avoid those. And with that, thanks very much, everyone. And any questions, please do ask. And thanks for having me.
Great, thank you.